Hello again. So this is my May wrap-up video. I had a pretty good reading month in May. I read 11 books, though some were quite a lot shorter than others. I know that it's already 8 days into June, but I'm late to this party anyway, so here goes. So the first book I read in May was All I Know Now by YouTuber Carrie Fletcher. This is non-fiction. I don't normally read much non-fiction, but I really enjoy her YouTube videos, so I thought I would probably like her book too. Basically, it's sort of a manual to being a teenager, but even though I'm not a teenager, I still really enjoyed it. It's a really lovely book full of interesting advice and wacky anecdotes, and what I like best about it is the conversational style of it. It's really funny to read, and Carrie Fletcher, she can write. I did a full review of it on my blog, which I will link down below in the thing. The second book I read in May was Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This is a reread. I've read this tons of times before, at least 5, possibly 10, because I love it. I've reread quite a lot of Jane Austen in the last year, and I was thinking as I was rereading Sense and Sensibility and Persuasion, is Pride and Prejudice really the best one, or has it just become the most popular of her books by chance, and actually there's better ones by her? And then I reread it, and no, it's just so good. There's this little hipster bit of me that wants to say that Mansfield Park is my favourite Jane Austen novel, and it's probably my second favourite, and it's really underrated, but just Pride and Prejudice is so good. Nothing makes me smile quite like that book. The third book I read in May was Aberystwyth, Monamour by Malcolm Pryce. I don't have the hard copy of it with me as I've already given it back to the friend that lent it to me. It's the first in a series of comic detective novels set in an alternative version of Aberystwyth, where the town is run by druids and there's a witches' co-op and drugs are smuggled in tea cozies. I did find it a bit confusing, but it's just such good fun, and the world Malcolm Pryce creates is really interesting. I did a full review of this on my blog again, which I will link down below. The fourth book I read was Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. This is a 1960s science fiction classic that I read as part of a science fiction book club that I'm in. It's about this man, Charlie, who has learning difficulties, and he undergoes a scientific experiment to try and raise his IQ. It's a really, really great book. Charlie's character progression is really interesting, and the whole thing is just very well done. It's been marketed as science fiction, but to be honest, it's probably also closer to literary fiction. Like, I think if it didn't have a mouse and a computer on the front, then you would find it in the general fiction section in a bookshop, not in the sci-fi bit. Marketing is weird. However, it's probably in between genres, as so many things are, but definitely worth a read. The next book I read was The Old Man of the Sea by Ernest Hemmingway. I don't have a hard copy of this because I gave it away to my boyfriend to see if he could get anything more out of the book than I could, because I really didn't like it. Now it just sounds like I give him bad books. I feel really bad because I really wanted to like this book. I've heard so many good things about this book and Ernest Hemingway in general, but I found it boring. It's basically about this old man who goes fishing to catch this really big fish. And it's probably much deeper and more metaphorical than that, but I just didn't really get it, and so I kind of found it dull. It probably also doesn't help that I have a phobia of fish, so I was probably just prejudiced against the whole storyline. But I really wanted to like it, but I just didn't. I'm sorry. I also read The Tiny Wife, which is a novella by Andrew Kauffman. Andrew Kaufman's been talked about quite a lot on BookTube, I think just because his All My Friends Are Superheroes is one of Carrie Fletcher's favourite books. And if you liked All My Friends Are Superheroes, you will definitely like The Tiny Wife. It's just as wacky and original and brilliant. Basically, a thief goes into a bank, but rather than stealing money, he steals from every customer there the item they have on their personal possession, which is of the most sentimental value to them. And after these people lose these objects, something weird starts to happen to all of them. What I love about Andrew Kaufman's books is that they're really odd and really fun and really heartwarming. It's a lovely book and really short, so it won't take you very long at all. The next book I read was Lord of the Flies by William Golding. This is actually the first time I've read it, although a lot of people in the UK are made to read it in school, but I never was. It's a 1950s book set during World War II. Basically, a plane of English schoolboys on their way to be evacuated crash on a desert island. And it's kind of about how they organise themselves into a society without adults, and then how that society kind of falls apart. It's a little bit dated in some ways. There's a lot about like savagery versus civilization, which seems a bit outdated now. But apart from that, it is a really great book. The story is really interesting, it's really well written, and even though it's a little bit depressing at times, it's a really interesting look into the minds and society of children. It's great. The next book I read was Where the Train Turns, which is a novella by Pasi Jaaskelainen. I'm sorry, I know that's not how you say his name, but I tried. This author also wrote The Rabbit-Back Literature Society, a book which I really loved. I read it a few months ago and I reviewed it on my blog, which I will link down below. I was really excited to read something else by him, especially as Where the Train Turns is the only other thing of his that's been translated into English. He's a Norwegian writer. It's basically about this woman and her young son. Her son becomes obsessed with trains and the idea that trains are leaving the tracks and having adventures of their own. I really loved the premise of this book and it's really well written, but I didn't like it quite as much as The Rabbit-Back Literature Society. I found the ending really odd. It didn't really seem to be led up to and it didn't seem to quite fit with the rest of the story, so I got a bit confused. However, I really enjoy his writing style, so I'll definitely be looking out for more books by him. I also read The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins, which I also reviewed on my blog, so I will link that down below. I actually really liked this. I wasn't expecting to at all because I'm not normally massive on thrillers, but I actually really enjoyed it. I found the characters as well as the plot really fascinating and I read it all in one day, which is always a good sign. In fact, I read it on a train, which is cool. I was a bit unsure about the ending, but I've said more about that on my blog, so you can read that down below if you're interested. And the final two books I read in May, which were definitely my favourite two of the month, were Goodbye Kazumi by Banana Yoshimoto and Hardboiled, Hard Luck, also by Banana Yoshimoto. She is an incredible, amazing Japanese author that I'm reading in translation. Her books are just so good. I recommend everything she's written. She is amazing. Goodbye Kazumi is about a young woman, Maria, and her relationship with her best friend and cousin, Kazumi. Kazumi is terminally ill and also not always an incredibly pleasant person, so the book's kind of about their relationship and Maria coming to terms both with Kazumi's illness and the kind of person she is. It is such a good book. I did a full review of it on my blog, which I will link down below. As you can see, my book is full of sticky notes because there were so many amazing quotes that I just didn't want to lose track of. It is such a good book. Hardboiled, Hard Luck is two novellas, Hardboiled and Hard Luck. In Hardboiled, a young woman goes to this sort of haunted hotel on the anniversary of the death of an old girlfriend of hers, and it's about her coming to terms with the death of this girlfriend. Hard Luck is about a young woman whose sister is on life support and the life support machine is about to be switched off. As you can tell, Banana Yoshimoto often deals with death and grief and loss in her books. It sounds like they're really depressing, but they're really, really not. She has this amazing way of writing about grief in a powerful, beautiful, poignant, but not depressing way, and it is brilliant. I love her books so much. I genuinely want to learn Japanese just so I can read them in the original language. They are so good. I first read a book of hers back in February called Kitchen, and since then I've been just buying everything of hers that's in translation and reading it at a massively fast rate. She is brilliant. So that was pretty much my May wrap up. Please let me know in the comments if you read any of these books and what you thought of them. I'll be back soon with another video, possibly one on Charles Dickens, and in the meantime, happy reading.